Hello, this is going to be my March 2013 video catch-up. I knew I wasn't going to be really good at keeping up to date with this, but I thought I was going to do it weekly at the beginning. I quickly found out that that wasn't going to be the case, so I thought doing it as a monthly thing would give me more to talk about and be easier to keep up to date with. But now we're in the middle of April and I'm just doing Marches. So anyhow, had 5 trips in March, and there were several of them that there's not much to tell, but then there was a couple that were pretty cool, so I'll get right to it. March 2nd, I was doing a seminar in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's one that there's not a whole lot for me to tell. I'd been to Louisiana, or to New Orleans previously. Baton Rouge, didn't really have much of a reason to stick around. I did while I was there. I got there early enough so that Friday afternoon I drove around, went to LSU campus and checked that out. It was pretty cool because most of you'll know LSU, or the Tigers, their mascot. They have their football stadium, and then the basketball stadium is right next to it. Well, in between, there's this big enclosure, and it's where they keep their actual tiger mascot. So I thought that was pretty unique and cool. So check that out. Had some good Louisiana crawfish and catfish for lunch that day, and but other than that, that was pretty much it. Went back to the hotel, had my seminar the next day, and had a okay seminar, and that was it. The next weekend, March 9th, I was in Lexington, Kentucky. I actually flew into Louisville and then drove over to Lexington, which was, if I remember right, maybe 45 minutes or so. Maybe it was a little longer than that, I can't remember. But I was sort of looking forward to this because I always hear how pretty that area is, but unfortunately, because it was the middle of March, still wintertime, wasn't all that much to see. I could see that, spring, summer, fall, it would be really pretty, but there wasn't a whole lot to see there. So not much to tell about that trip. Another okay seminar, and did that, then drove back to Louisville and caught my flight back home. The following weekend, Saturday, March 16th, I did a seminar in Cleveland, Ohio. That was actually a cool trip. I got in pretty early, so when I got there, I'd been debating what to do, and that's a place where they would normally not get me a car because the airport and hotel are so close together. We would just take the shuttle over. But once I started thinking about it, you've got the Music Hall of Fame there, you've got the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, which isn't too far away. So I decided I was going to get a car for myself, which I did. And since I just had Friday afternoon, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do both. In Canton, again, if I remember right, it was probably an hour and a half, I think, or so, maybe not quite that far. But it was a little distance away from Cleveland. So I didn't figure I'd have enough time really to get there and see it and then get back. So the Music Hall of Fame is right there in downtown Cleveland. It's right next to their football stadium. So I thought, while I'm there, I'll go see that. So went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that was pretty cool. I got there probably a couple hours before closing, and so I was a little bit I'm disappointed now because when I first got there, I wasn't sure. I mean, it's about 4 or 5 levels, and I didn't know how long it would take me to go through the whole thing. And so when I first started off, I was like breezing through because I wanted to see everything before it closed up. Well, I ended up getting through and still had 30 or 45 minutes to spare, so at that point I wish I'd slowed down and take a little more time. But it was pretty cool to go in and see that, and the Beatles section was pretty impressive and had a pretty big Elvis area. They had I guess, I don't know if it's every month or how often, but they do a spotlight on a different member of the hall. And at that point, they had a thing going for the Grateful Dead. So it's like the top 2 sections are just all Grateful Dead stuff. So it was cool. I mean, it was neat to see some of that, and for people who are into music, I mean, there was just such history there. I mean, going through the Beatles, and they had the handwritten lyrics to "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." They had a sheet which it was some of the music and stuff that they used when they recorded "Hey Jude." Stuff like John Lennon's glasses and things like that, and of course a bunch of Elvis's costumes and whatnot. I mean, it was really cool to do that. I was glad to. I mean, who knows when I'll get to Cleveland again, if ever. So I'm glad I got to do that. Next time if I go, I wouldn't mind going there again, spend a little more time. But I would definitely go down to Canton next time and see the Football Hall of Fame. So that was Cleveland. Cool trip. The following week, the 23rd of March, I went down to Miami, and Scott was actually doing a seminar in Fort Lauderdale, which is where I flew into. But I got in real early again. He wasn't getting in until later that afternoon. I got in at like 11 o'clock or so. So I drove down to my hotel in Miami and got situated a little bit. And then we decided we were going to meet up. So we found a nice little sports bar on the water. We were able to go and eat together. And there was a Carolina game at the time. I think it might have been the start of the tournament. So got to see, we watched Carolina's, I think it was their first game of the tournament, and had a nice little dinner there, and then went back to the hotel. And other than that, there wasn't a whole lot to tell. I'm going back to Miami later on this year, and I'm hoping that the Dolphins will be playing at home that week. The schedule comes out actually, I think tomorrow night. Tonight or tomorrow night, so crossing my fingers. So planning on staying a day or two on that trip. So this one I figured I'd just go down for the day, and that was it. So that was Miami. And then the following week I was in Seattle, so we're talking Saturday, March 30th. Actually flew down on Friday. For those of you who might not know, and not that there's anybody going to be watching this who wouldn't already know this, but generally we hire a temp from whatever area that we are doing our seminar at, and they will be our helper. They'll sign people in and sort of help us at the end, try and get people to enroll in our programs at the seminars. But occasionally, if we want, we can take somebody as our helper. In fact, on April's video journal, I'll tell you about Toronto, where I went up to help Scott with a seminar. So I was sort of his helper. But a lot of the guys, there's only 2 more of us, but they're both married, so occasionally they'll take their wives with them. Well, this one, being up in Seattle, my dad being originally from Tacoma, I invited him to come and meet me up there as my helper. So the company was actually good enough to fly him up to be my helper, and so he met me up there. He actually flew up with Scott because Scott was going up to do a seminar in Vancouver that Saturday, and I was doing the one in Seattle. So they actually flew up together. I got there a couple hours early, but we all met up at the airport, and we got to well, unfortunately that night Scott had to go across the border, so he left, and then that was Friday night. Saturday we did our seminars. Good seminar in Seattle, decent anyway. And then Saturday Scott drove back down from Vancouver to Seattle, and his flight wasn't until Sunday morning. So the 3 of us went downtown Seattle. I've got a bunch of pictures that I don't think I've even posted yet, but went downtown and went to see all the sights of downtown, and got some good pictures. And my dad and I's favorite thing about Seattle is a place called the Crab Pot. He asked me what I wanted to do while we were there, and I told him as long as we got to go to the Crab Pot, that was about all that I cared about. But It's just a seafood restaurant, and they have a steamed seafood pot. They just bring you. Usually get it for 2 people, and they just bring you out this big bucket of steamed seafood, crab, oysters, scallops. No, I don't think they had scallops, but shrimp. Just all this stuff, all this mainly shellfish, and they just pour it on your table, and then leave the bucket on the floor next to you so you can throw all your shells down there. So we went there, and it was great. And Scott actually surprised us. Scott is not a seafood person, but I think he felt a little out of place because everybody there was eating seafood, and he was looking at getting a hamburger or something. So he actually joined us in. We got this crab feast this steamed feast for 3 instead of 2, and we just had a gigantic pile of seafood. But it was delicious. So that made my whole trip right there. So we had a good day and night there in downtown Seattle. Scott left the next day, so my dad and I drove from Seattle down to Tacoma, back to my dad's old stomping grounds, and spent the next couple days down there, and that was really cool. I mean, the whole Seattle Tacoma area is just beautiful. You've got Mount Rainier right there, and tons of great pictures of that. But then going down to Tacoma, and I've been there before, but it's been a long time ago, and back then I wouldn't have appreciated it as much as I do now. And so getting to drive around with my dad and him showing me his childhood house where he grew up and telling me stories. We went to dinner with one of his high school buddies, and hearing them talk and tell different stories and whatnot, that was pretty cool. Learned a few things about my family on that side. Not that I necessarily learned anything, but was reminded again. It was good to hear some of this stuff now that I'm older and appreciate it, but most people wouldn't know this, but my I guess the bloodline for my family and what our last name would be is actually Armstrong. So I could be Rick Armstrong right now. My grandfather was adopted. His parents were Armstrongs and gave him up for adoption when he was young, and he was adopted by Howards. And that's how I'm now a Howard and not an Armstrong. So again, it was interesting to hear my dad retell that story, and just be able to appreciate it now that I'm older. We went to a cemetery where his grandparents were buried, and his aunt, a couple other people, including one of his cousins that he said he was always really close to. And it's actually the cousin that I was named after. He went into the Army, I think it was the Army, and actually got killed in I think Vietnam. But his name was Richard, and he's the person I was named after. So again, I've been told that through my life, but just never meant that much to me. And going there and seeing the graves and everything, and having the story told to me now was pretty cool. So we did that. On Sunday, we drove around, drove down to Tacoma and drove around a bunch. Went to dinner with his high school friend that night. And then the following day, we did some more driving around. There is a new golf course, just really neat golf course, that is pretty much brand new considering. But they're going to be having the U.S. Open there in a couple years. And so we went and checked that out just to look at it. My dad plans on being a volunteer for the Open, so we went and checked that out and went to lunch with a couple of my dad's cousins, and so that was good. Afterwards, we went over to across the bridge from Tacoma is an island called Fox Island. It's a place where my dad had his grandparents had a cabin on, and he spent most of his summers over there. So we went over there and drove around. It was really pretty, and I think it was good for him to go back and relive some memories and stuff, and cool for me to hear him. And so just a lot of sightseeing and storytelling from his side, and it was a cool trip. So flew back. We stayed Sunday and Monday, flew back Tuesday. So nice long weekend that I was able to spend with my dad and Scott for a day. But it was, it's as much as traveling every weekend gets tiring, and you sort of start getting worn out having to deal with airports and rental car companies and hotels and all that stuff. I'm really trying to make the most of it, and getting to do stuff like that in Cleveland, going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and getting to spend that time with my dad in Seattle and Tacoma, makes me thankful that I've got a job that allows me to do that stuff. So anyhow, that's March wrapped up. So this month, let's see, I was in Allentown, Pennsylvania a couple weekends ago, and I flew into Philadelphia. So, and I stayed an extra day there, so I'll have quite a bit to tell about that. That was another really cool trip. Last week, I was in Buffalo for a Thursday night seminar, and then with Scott in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, a place called Mississauga, where we did a Saturday seminar together. And that was pretty fun. Went downtown Toronto and hung out a little bit. This weekend I'm in Long Island, and next week I'm in Charlotte. So a couple more trips this week, and then I'll get back for the wrap up for April. So that's it for March, and I'll see you next time. Bye.